the invisible victory that almost no one is willing to build. Here's a paradox that few people accept. It's not a lack of talent that's holding you back. It's a lack of invisible skills. Everyone wants to change their outcome, but almost no one wants to change what they do when no one is watching. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable part to hear, because it removes the blame from the world, from circumstances, from luck, and places the responsibility exactly where it always was, in your daily choices. Napoleon Hill, you've seen it firsthand. Brilliant people, full of potential, stuck in the same place for years, waiting for the right moment, the perfect motivation, the external push. Meanwhile, others, not so talented, moved forward in silence, without announcement, without noise, without applause. The difference? Daily discipline applied to simple practices, repeated even when the excitement faded. It's not sexy, it's not viral, but it works, always has. Perhaps you identify with that strange feeling of knowing you can do more, but feeling that something invisible is holding you back. Lack of focus, too much distraction, lack of consistency, too much intention. And the most curious thing, you don't need more information. You need mental structure, a set of practices that aligns mind, body, and action, just as Napoleon Hill observed in history's greatest achievers. And that's exactly what you'll find here. No magic promises, no illusory shortcuts, but a clear, practical, and silent roadmap to transformation. 15 practices that, when applied daily, change the way you think, decide, and act. The question isn't whether they work. The real question is, are you willing to live like few others live in order to achieve what few others achieve? Wake up before the world, the victory that nobody sees. Life doesn't change when you want it to. It changes when it's on time. And waking up before the world isn't just about getting up early. It's about train the mind to command, not to be commanded. While most are in just 5 more minutes mode, you're already saying it without words. I'm in charge. It may seem small, but that's where identity starts to turn, like that gear that nobody sees moving, until the result appears. And here's the key point. Those who wake up early don't just save time. They gain silence. And silence is a rare kind of wealth today. You use this space as a secret laboratory to think, plan, pray, study, write, train, whatever works. You don't need to become a monk at 5 a.m. You just need an honest agreement with yourself. I don't negotiate my promise. Because in the end, discipline is that, an internal deal that you honor without an audience. Now, to avoid all this blah blah blah, do something simple. Lay out your clothes, put the alarm clock far from the bed, and set a short ritual type. Splash water on your face, a glass of water, 10 minutes of reading, and 5 minutes of note-taking. If you want a good list for these, mornings, Think and Grow Rich, Hill, Atomic Habits, James Clear, The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg, light reading, but with a catchy idea. And when you realize the day started off under control, then comes the next obvious and dangerous step with you. He woke up early? What exactly? You, and what will you do with this beginning? Set clear intentions for the day. Stop living in reaction mode. After waking up before the rest of the world, you realized something rather uncomfortable, yet liberating. Time without direction becomes elegant waste. It's no use gaining hours if your mind remains lost. That's why you never start your day improvising. Before any task, you stop and decide. 3 clear intentions. That's all. It's not an endless list. It's surgical focus. 3 moves. That's it. Because those who try to do everything end up not doing the essentials. The day is like a river. If you don't set its course, the current will carry it away, and it usually carries it to shallower waters. Men's ages, requests from others, emergencies that weren't his. So you write, by hand, something like 1. Advance the main project. 2. Take care of the body. 3. Nourish the mind. Simple, direct, without embellishment. Napoleon Hill would call that a defined purpose in daily action, that invisible bridge between vision and concrete result. And here comes the practical part that almost no one does. Before proceeding, you ask yourself, if I only accomplish this today, will it have been worth it? If the answer is yes, you proceed confidently. If it's no, you adjust without drama. Planning this way doesn't restrict you. It provides clarity, reduces anxiety, and saves mental energy. But there's a curious detail. Setting intentions is easy when the mind is clear. The problem is when the body is heavy and energy is low. And that's exactly where the next step in the game comes in. Condition your body to strengthen your mind. Discipline in motion. It took him a while to understand this, but once he did, there was no going back. A strong mind resides in an active body. This isn't just fitness talk, it's a mental strategy. Whenever the body is in motion, something unlocks inside. Focus improves, clarity increases, procrastination loses its power. It's almost like pressing an internal "let's go" button. Napoleon Hill already said that self-discipline begins where comfort ends, and the body is the first training ground. And no, you didn't start at an expensive gym or with some elaborate plan. You started with the basics. A 20-minute walk, push-ups in your room, stretching when you wake up. The secret wasn't intensity, it was consistency. Every day, even when I didn't feel like it. Especially on those days. Because each workout becomes a silent message to the mind. I do what needs to be done. And this message spreads. Work, studies, difficult decisions. Everything gets better. For those who want something simple and applicable right now. Wake up, move your body before touching your cell phone. It could be climbing stairs, jumping rope, squats, light jogging. If you want to improve, books like The Body Speaks or Spark, John Ratey, help to understand this mind-body connection in a practical way. And when you finish the exercise, you notice something curious. The mind becomes more obedient. But there's a common mistake that sabotages all of this. Surrendering this newly activated mind to digital chaos right afterward. And that's where the next topic comes in heavily. Control the first digital hour. Whoever controls attention controls the day. He realized early on that he wasn't wasting energy at work. He was losing it. Before, to begin with, all it took was waking up, grabbing the phone, and that was it. The mind was already in reaction mode. News, messages, comparisons, emergencies that weren't his. The first hour of the day became an auction for attention. Then you did something that seems simple, but is almost revolutionary. Today, shielded the first digital hour. No feeds, no emails, no notifications. Just focus. This choice changed everything. Because the mind, right after waking up, is extremely suggestible. It's like fresh clay. Napoleon Hill talked a lot about this when discussing the subconscious. What goes in first shapes the rest. So instead of handing this clay over to the world, you started feeding it with reading, silence, movement, or writing. Sometimes I just stayed quiet, thinking. Weird? Maybe. Powerful? Definitely. To apply without drama. Leave your cell phone out of the bedroom or on airplane mode until you complete your initial routine. If you need something to fill that space, choose a short and dense book. The Richest Man in Babylon works well, or write down 3 thoughts in a notebook. The curious thing is that when you finally enter the digital world, you enter leading, not reacting. But maintaining this clarity requires more than avoiding external distractions. It requires taking care of what you put into your mind every day. And that leads us directly to the next point. Feed your mind with greatness. What you consume builds you. No one gets strong by eating garbage, and the mind works the same way. It's no use waking up early, planning your day, and shielding yourself from digital distractions if your daily content is shallow, negative, or repetitive. The mind is a fertile ground. Everything that enters grows. Napoleon Hill talked about this all the time. Ideas are seeds, and the subconscious doesn't curate them. It only multiplies them. Therefore, make a simple agreement with yourself. Every day, a conscious contact with greatness. It could be 10 pages from a good book, an inspiring audio recording, or a well-chosen biography. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. Books like Think and Grow Rich, Smarter Than the Devil or Triumph Law. These aren't quick reads, but each page stretches the way you think. And when the mind thinks bigger, behavior begins to follow. In practice, you replaced 30 minutes of automatic scrolling with 10 minutes of focused reading. It seems like a small amount, but the cumulative effect is incredible. In weeks, decisions become clearer, internal dialogue changes, and the vision of the future expands. But here's a detail that few understand. It's not enough to absorb big ideas. You need to see oneself living these ideas. And that's exactly where the next practice comes in. The one that separates those who merely learn from those who truly transform. Visualize with intention. Before it exists outside, it needs to exist inside. Napoleon Hill, he learned this by observing people who were always one step ahead. They already mentally inhabited the place they wanted to reach. It wasn't daydreaming or cheap motivational fantasy. It was internal training. Visualizing, for him, became a kind of silent rehearsal. Every day, for a few minutes, he would close his eyes and see himself acting like the version he wanted to. Build, posture, tone of voice, decisions, routine. He didn't just see, I felt. That's the key. Napoleon Hill was direct on this point. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. But belief doesn't spring from nothing. It comes from emotional repetition. The brain doesn't clearly distinguish between what is lived and what is intensely imagined. Athletes use this. Leaders use this. Entrepreneurs use this. So he started simply. He visualized meetings going well, projects completed, firm decisions being made. Nothing mystical, strategic. For those who want to apply this now, choose a fixed time of day, take a deep breath, and imagine a specific scene from the future you desire. Don't generalize. Visualize the environment, the people, the concrete outcome. If you want to reinforce it, write down what you visualized afterward. Over time, he noticed something curious. His behavior began to align itself. But to prevent this new identity from remaining adrift, it was necessary, anchor, the no paper, to make the invisible concrete. And that's where the next step comes in. Write to strengthen your identity. Whoever writes governs their own mind. Relying solely on memory was a costly mistake. Good ideas evaporate, intentions become confused, emotions get mixed up. So start writing. Not as a professional writer, but as someone who needed to. Organizing one's own thoughts. Writing becomes a form of self-leadership. When the pen touches the paper, the mind slows down and begins to obey. It's simple, but it works. Napoleon Hill did this obsessively. Notebooks, notes, phrases, goals, statements. He didn't let his most important ideas float around in his head. And that's what inspired this habit. Every day, 5 minutes of conscious writing. Sometimes it was a goal, sometimes a powerful question, sometimes a phrase like, I am becoming a disciplined and focused person. Nothing poetic, just functional. In practice, you suggest something simple. Keep a notebook just for this. Write down in the morning who you decide to be that day, or at night, what you learned. You can also write affirmations in the form of identity, not desire. Instead of "I want to be," use "I act as." Gradually, something changes. The mind begins to align, but there is a silent risk. Doing all this on autopilot. And that's exactly where the next practice comes in, to fine-tune the game. Practice total presence. Excellence doesn't come from haste. After structuring your routine, mind, and identity, you notice an almost invisible detail. It was no use doing everything right if your mind was elsewhere. You could wake up early, write, visualize, but if you were distracted, fragmented, rushed, the impact diminished. So you started practicing something that seems simple, but requires maturity, total presence, being where you are, without performance pressure, without anxiety disguised as productivity. Anxiety arises when the mind dwells on the future, and mediocrity arises when it lives on autopilot. Presence is the antidote to both. Napoleon Hill observed that high achievers had something in common: controlled attention. When they worked, they really worked. When they listened with their whole bodies. It wasn't speed. It was depth. In practice, you started small. One task at a time, phone away. Full attention until completion. Washing dishes? You washed them. Writing? You only wrote. Walking? You walked feeling the ground beneath your feet. It seems trivial, but this transforms common tasks into daily mental training. But being present also brings a powerful side effect. It begins to reveal hidden sabotaging thoughts. And when they appear, you can no longer ignore them. That's where the next step comes in. Control the internal dialogue, the conversation that decides everything, one's own inner voice. Not the one who speaks aloud, but the one who comments on everything in silence. And there lay the problem. Often, that voice wasn't an ally, it was a saboteur. Phrases like, "This is not for you," "Have you tried this before?" "It won't work," they showed up without asking permission. So you understand, whoever doesn't govern this dialogue becomes its hostage. Simple as that. Napoleon Hill warned that the subconscious accepts any command repeated with emotion. Negative or positive, it doesn't matter. So he created a habit of conscious interruption. Whenever a limiting thought arose, he would stop and change the phrase. Not with motivational lies, but with direction. Instead of "I can't," she said, "I'm learning." Instead of "That's just how I am," she said, "I'm a work in progress." Small changes, giant impact. To apply this, observe your thoughts as if you were listening to someone else speak to you. If you wouldn't accept it coming from someone else, don't accept it coming from yourself. Create guiding phrases and repeat them at key moments of the day. Over time, the internal tone changes. But thoughts don't live in isolation. They are influenced by the environment. And if the environment is sabotaging you, the game becomes unfair. That's where the next topic comes in. Eliminate structural distractions. The environment also decides for you. After adjusting your internal dialogue, you realized something almost obvious, but ignored by many people. It's not just willpower that fails, it's the environment that sabotages it. Trying to stay focused in a chaotic environment is like trying to meditate in the middle of an intersection. So you stopped blaming yourself so much and started to reorganize the land: fewer stimuli, fewer choices, less noise. Because focus isn't a gift, it's an art. Napoleon Hill called this controlling the mental environment. He argued that the mind molds itself to the most constant influences. Therefore, what surrounds it needs to help, not compete. In practice, he cleared his desk, closed tabs, silenced notifications, and created blocks of uninterrupted time. It seems like a detail, but details run the game. A cell phone far away already changes everything. To apply now, define a specific space for creating and another for resting. Don't mix them. Use airplane mode for short periods. Reduce visual stimuli. A clean desk, a clear schedule, a protected timetable. Over time, the mind begins to respond better. But there is something even more powerful than controlling the external environment. Control how much you expose yourself, and that's where the next practice comes in. Cultivate strategic silence. Not everything needs to be said. At some point in your journey, you noticed a silent trap. Talking too much drains energy. Sharing plans, announcing goals, explaining processes, all of that creates a momentary feeling of progress, but it steals focus. So you learn to use silence as a strategy, not as an escape. Keeping what's being built to yourself became a form of protection. Less talk, more structure. Napoleon Hill observed this pattern in highly successful people. They didn't narrate the process, they presented the result. Not out of arrogance, but out of clarity. When you talk too much, you create external expectations. When you act in silence, you create internal strength. You began to share less and execute more. Interestingly, the less you explained, the more you progressed. In practice, you did something simple. You chose two trusted people to exchange ideas and kept the rest in operational silence. No posting every step, no justifying choices. This silence became fuel. But it has an interesting side effect. When you silence the external, you begin to hear the internal more clearly. And this opens up space for something essential: conscious reflection. That's exactly where the next topic comes in. Reflect daily. Experience only becomes wisdom when it is observed. With less outside noise and more strategic silence, you realize that the days passed by too quickly when there wasn't consciously revisited. Acting without thinking was like running without looking at the map. Then a simple, almost discreet, but extremely powerful habit emerged: reflecting every day. Not to judge oneself, but to understand patterns. What worked? What drained energy? What deserves repetition? That's how growth compounds work. Napoleon Hill said that failure is only permanent for those who refuse to learn. And learning requires pauses. At the end of the day, he would set aside a few minutes to examine his own behavior like a mentor looking at a promising student. Without guilt, without drama. Just fine adjustments. Small, but consistent. Because real evolution doesn't come from big turnarounds, it comes from daily micro-corrections. In practice, he would write down 3 things: a success, an adjustment, and an intention for the next day. It could be on paper or on his cell phone. The format doesn't matter, consistency does. Over time, the mind begins to recognize patterns on its own. But this level of awareness brings an inevitable question: if I'm growing, who does that benefit besides myself? And that's where the next step comes in. Serve with intention. Growing without contributing empties you. At a certain point, Napoleon Hill understood something counterintuitive. Personal growth that doesn't overflow begins to weigh you down. Serving has ceased to be something nice and has become a strategy for internal alignment. Doing something for someone without expecting immediate return reorganizes priorities and cleanses the ego. Napoleon Hill called this mutual benefit. No one prospers alone for very long. He started simply: listening more, helping without fanfare, sharing knowledge when asked. A sincere piece of advice here, a practical gesture there. And something curious happened. The more he served, the more clarity he gained. Serving takes the excessive focus away from oneself and restores meaning to daily effort. It grounds you. To apply, ask yourself every morning, how can I be useful today? It doesn't have to be grand. It could be honest feedback, a simple favor, genuine listening. But serving also requires something fundamental to avoid becoming self-deception, integrity with small promises, and that's exactly what the next topic addresses. Honor small commitments. Character is built in the invisible. It wasn't the grand plan that defined who you became, but the small promises kept waking up on time, doing the short workout, reading the promised pages. No one applauds this, but the mind registers. Everything. Each promise kept reinforces the identity of someone trustworthy. Each broken promise erodes that internal image. Napoleon Hill warned, "Failure begins when you accept failing yourself." And it's not in a big decision, it's in the "I'll do it later" mentality. So create simple, non-negotiable rules. Few, but sacred. Better a little consistent than a lot unstable. That's discipline in real life. In practice, you choose a minimum daily commitment, something impossible to negotiate. Even on bad days. Because character isn't born from enthusiasm, it's born from repetition. And when that foundation is solid, something rare emerges. Ability to think big without losing sight of the present. That's where the last point comes in. Visualize the long term. Act in the short term. Vision without execution is an illusion. You need learning to balance two timelines, the future that inspires and the present that builds. Visualizing the long term provided direction, but acting in the short term provided traction. Napoleon Hill called this the harmony between a defined purpose and a plan of action. Dreaming big without acting generates anxiety. Acting without vision generates exhaustion. The power lies in the middle ground. Every day you review the bigger vision, who you want to become in 5, 10 years. And then immediately ask yourself, what is the smallest step I can take today? Not perfect, but possible. Small, but real. Because it is these almost invisible steps that, accumulated, create extraordinary leaps. And when you realize it, these practices were no longer effort. They were identity. But understanding this isn't enough. The real turning point comes now, when all of this needs to be consciously set in motion. It is precisely this point that prepares the ground for the introduction that connects pain, choice, and transformation. The decision that separates those who understand from those who transform. Now let me ask you an honest question. How many times have you consumed powerful content, felt that inner click, and returned to the exact same routine the next day? It's not a lack of ability. It's a lack of sustained decision-making. Knowledge doesn't change anyone. What changes you is what you become. Repeats when the enthusiasm fades. And everything you've heard so far only makes sense if it becomes daily practice. So look at your own life now. Which of these practices do you know, deep down, that you need to start today? Waking up earlier? Shielding your attention? Taking care of your internal dialogue? Being faithful to small commitments? Don't try to do everything. Choose just one. But treat that choice as something sacred. Because that's how identity begins to change. Not through grand promises, but through small, honorable acts every day. And here's the final provocation. If you continue living on autopilot, your life in 5 years will be just a tired version of what it already is today. But if you take control of these invisible practices, no one will be able to ignore the results. Not because you said so, but because the world always responds to those who build in silence. If this made sense to you, comment below which practice you're going to apply first. I want to know. And if you want to continue surrounding your mind with ideas that strengthen focus, discipline, and clarity, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, we don't live on momentary motivation. We build real transformation, one day at a time.